Hello, thank you for joining us today to learn more about why you should vote no on Measure T, which will save Measure Y. Measure T is a developer's dream and a taxpayer's nightmare. Measure T stands for trouble and is nothing but terrible for San Mateo residents. If you only have a few minutes, the summary of why you should vote no on Measure T and save Measure Y is that Measure Y was only passed only 4 years ago, and voters' wishes should be honored by our elected officials. Measure Y holds our elected officials accountable to the voters and balances the corrupting influence of big money. Measure Y already encourages transit-oriented development and meets our state housing requirements for the current cycle. Importantly, Measure Y requires that affordable housing actually gets built within existing development. And Measure Y has allowed significant development throughout San Mateo over the 30 plus years it's been in its various iterations that it's been in existence, especially given the multitude of state laws that have been passed that override and augment the limits imposed by Measure Y. Before we dive in, it's complicated talking about housing in San Mateo or California in general. It's technical. There's a lot of acronyms and whatnot. If you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to us at the email on the front. It'll come up at the back again if you have questions. But at its core, the arguments against Measure T are really around fairly non-complicated things like trust and accuracy and whether things do what they say they're going to do. So the first thing that the Measure T people are going to come at you with are a bunch of scare tactics. And they're going to say, but the city says they're going to implement the builder's remedy. It is a scare tactic. It is not automatically triggered by the defeat of T. And it's been used historically against cities that haven't acted in good faith. There's a number of cities in California that have really kind of told the state to pound sand. And as a result, they've had some of these things imposed upon them. However, to date, the builder's remedy, and it's had quote unquote teeth for about 2 years or so, has yielded 0 projects and precisely 0 units of housing produced. It's so bad, in fact, that they just signed a new law this last week, AB 1893, that provides some parameters around those projects to try to rein them in so they might actually get some traction with it. But so far, it's done absolutely nothing. The city's also going to threaten you, saying they're going to come in and upzone your neighborhoods with triplexes and quadplexes. Again, this is a scare tactic. It's not automatically triggered. Yes, if the measure doesn't pass, the city has to take a backup action and find more units throughout the city. But if you've been paying attention to the general 2040 GP or 2040 general plan, which just by way of definition is the blueprint, if you will, for development in the city through the year 2040. And they just completed that process and adopted the parts of the plan that don't exceed Measure Y. The rest is covered by this ballot. There was significant upzoning in the 2040 general plan, and it ignores all of these state laws that grant massive bonuses, even bonuses on top of those bonuses, if you can believe that, which gives the city sufficient buffer, more than sufficient buffer to find those units without upzoning neighborhoods. You're also going to hear a lot about the city will require 15% affordable housing, and that's just simply not true. At any time, with just 3 council votes, this can be removed or overridden. It also opens the door to what are called in lieu fees. So instead of actually building the units, they get to pay a fee, which is generally less than what it costs to build the unit. And given the rate at which construction costs are rising, those in lieu fees are just like if you buy a new car, as soon as you drive it off the lot and those things are paid or committed to, the value of them immediately starts decreasing. And that results in units not getting built, or it creates ghettos, or the projects never ever get built because the money gets siphoned off somewhere else. Measure Y, again, it's in place and it requires those affordable housing units get built within the existing projects and cannot be overridden with just 3 council votes. So if any of you have seen the measure here, the ballot measure, it's even giving some license for favorable wording, shall we say, in ballot measures. This one is a doozy in terms of just how very misleading it is. And so the measure literally reads, shall the measure to allow for additional affordable housing for low and middle income residents and meet state housing requirements without raising taxes, while enhancing parks and open spaces, allowing existing residential neighborhoods to stay low density, and reducing traffic impacts while allowing future housing to be concentrated primarily downtown along the El Camino corridor near Caltrain stations where it is close to transit, jobs, infrastructure, and services be adopted. Well, that sounds incredible, doesn't it? And do we get a puppy and free ice cream and a pony too? It turns out that this is highly inaccurate and misleading, and that's being pretty generous. So let's break it down by phrase. So the first phrase here, where it says to allow for additional affordable housing for low and middle income residents, the reality is that Measure 2 requires absolutely no affordable housing, again, with any 3 votes on council. And if any of you have been going to council meetings or planning commission meetings, you know that the council and commissioners and whatnot are under a lot of pressure to concede to developers. And San Mateo does not have a history of pushing back on developers and getting concessions. It typically goes the other way. It also removes those longstanding requirements for the actual construction of affordable housing in every new development. It also allows for the massive growth of unaffordable, i.e. luxury housing. And that's what this whole model is predicated upon, that you're going to build thousands and thousands of units of luxury housing with a lot of concessions and bonuses that will incentivize developers to build the still very expensive affordable housing. It's the only way you can get it done without providing subsidies. But along with that comes millions of square feet of office and other non-housing developments. So there are a lot of bad things that come along with Measure T that they choose not to talk about, and a lot of things that Measure T claims to do that it simply doesn't. Meeting state housing requirements. Measure Y already meets RHNA Cycle 6 requirements. RHNA is basically the mandated quota of housing that has to be zoned for and built within a given cycle. It's an 8-year cycle, Cycle 6, 2023 to 2031. So we're about a third of the way through that. And Measure Y already meets that. Attempting to look beyond 2030, which, by the way, is when Measure Y expires naturally, so this whole exercise is kind of unnecessary, is both reckless and unscientific. For example, the city projected a population the last time they updated their general plan. They projected that San Mateo would be 118,000 people by 2025. And right now, it sits around 100,000 people. So we have no idea what it's going to look like. Without raising taxes, this one, even within this crazy wording, is even more of a doozy. Yes, technically, Measure T does not explicitly raise taxes within the context of this measure. However, anyone who pays attention to the general plan and looks at it knows that there's a massive unfunded burden of infrastructure and everything around all this additional development that will fall directly to taxpayers. So whether they end up being fees or bonds or taxes, it's still money out of residents' pockets. So flood-free San Mateo is a great example of that. It's a property tax now that we had to vote for and we had to support because the city kicked the can down the road on decades of maintenance of the lagoon, pump maintenance, pump upgrades and whatnot, ignored climate change. And that's not just a 10 or 20-year bond. It is permanent. So are you ready for crime-free San Mateo to have a dedicated funding source for the police and fire-free San Mateo for the fire department, or want water San Mateo? These are sort of facetious, but not really, because you can expect more and more of these for every existing public service that is currently handled by the city. While enhancing parks and open space, in reality, there's absolutely nothing in Measure T or the general plan that enhances open space that isn't already handled by Measure Y. Allowing existing residential neighborhoods to stay low density, again, no, and we need look no further than this. I'm sure most of you have seen the Pixar movie Up, which in and of itself was based upon a true story of a home in Seattle that I believe is there and surrounded by high-rise as well. It's not fictional anymore or Seattle-based. This is an actual project in San Mateo for a project that's in pipeline to be built, Block 20 downtown. It's 7 stories, and this rendering shows the building engulfing the Claremont House, the oldest home in San Mateo, and the building next to it, the Japanese American Cultural Center, I want to say it is. They're 2 of the oldest homes in San Mateo, and they'll absolutely be dwarfed by this project. And this project is directly across the street from single-family homes. So, so much for the idea that it's going to step down and blend with the neighborhoods. We had a lot of people talk about the Elks Club project, which is right on 20th Avenue, and that could be 6 stories. And we had a number of people attend our meetings that were expressing alarm around that. That happens all over San Mateo. Reducing traffic impacts. This is perhaps the most egregious lie because it worsens traffic, but instead leans on these rosy per capita numbers. It objectively and quantitatively, Measure T, makes traffic noise and air quality, among other things. It makes your life in general in San Mateo much, much worse. And then bringing it home while allowing future housing to be concentrated primarily downtown along the ECR corridor and near Caltrain stations where it is close to transit, jobs, infrastructure, and services. Again, the reality is that development is going to occur across most of the city, and any other form of development will be allowed at the whim of 3 council votes. So think of where those campaign donations are going. Think about council members that have higher aspirations within the city, the county, and the state, or higher. The development interests are funding all of that heavily, and they will do their bidding. Transit, we all know that is sorely, sorely lacking outside of Caltrain. Jobs, people are going to work where they work, and there's rarely a correlation between those two over any length of time. Infrastructure and services, Measure T completely ignores infrastructure and services. Again, the burden of those will fall to taxpayers, who will pay more and more for less and less. So given all of that, all the inaccuracies and misleading information in the ballot measure itself, why would you trust them and give them your vote? But wait, there's more. If we follow the money, which you always should, so I don't know about you, whenever I see a lot of glossy mailers and TV commercials that promise the world, I immediately think I'm being misled. Our organization, SMERG, is a grassroots organization. We had the budget to send out 1 mailer. Development interests spent over $1.5 million to defeat Measure Y in 2020, and we beat them anyway. And now they're back hoping Measure T will kill Measure Y, which it's designed to do. You've gotten a bunch of expensive glossy mailers that are designed to mislead and confuse you and threaten you with the things I talked about earlier. At its core, this is all about who controls our future and who benefits, local residents or real estate development interests. Measure T, which enables, again, General Plan 2040 or GP 2040, calls for 20,000 homes to be built in San Mateo. That is a 50% population increase, or 50,000 people. Think about that. So by 2040, they want to grow the city, or they're zoning for or planning for increase of population by 50%. Now, housing, dirty little secret, is that it costs $800,000 plus per unit, and that cost is rising by double digits annually. Now, those RENA mandates, right, those quotas that I talked about before, those stem from the need for affordable housing. And again, we have to build those 20,000 homes to get a small percentage of affordable by giving developers bonuses and making concessions. But just doing some really basic math on that, 20,000 times $800,000 a unit, developers, real estate, and other special interests stand to make $16 billion just for the construction of those units. So it should come as no surprise that the usual suspects are donating heavily and have donated heavily. Hillsdale, Prometheus, Ceres Regis, contractors like Butler, construction unions and whatnot. 96% of the money, of the $175,000 in total contributions, have come from developers and special interests. And sadly, your mayor and your council members have all lined up behind them and against the residents to contribute what amounts to 99% of the total $175,000. Plus, just to sweeten it, the city has been kind enough to donate $250,000 of your taxpayer money to do surveys to get keywords that they put in their glossy mailers to make you think this is all amazing. And it totals up to a grand total of $425,000. That is a large multiple of what we've raised on the grassroots side, all of which are small donations from residents of San Mateo. And we have to look at what's the real cause of unaffordability. Remember, the real crisis is an affordability crisis. And in this case, the call may very well be coming from inside the house. And the cause of that unaffordability is likely greed and corruption. And this is a clip from an article that talks about how the Department of Justice is now investigating nationally huge landlords, many of them in the Bay Area, that have colluded to inflate rents. Two of the donors to Measure T, Saris Regis and Prometheus, are listed in that complaint. And one of the quotes from the unidentified landlord in the complaint defines it exactly the way it is. It's price fixing. So they're colluding to keep the rents artificially high. So we don't even really know what the vacancy rates are in these places. We don't know what the market rate rent really should be, but it's safe to say it should probably be significantly lower than what it is, and at least track what the economy is and actual supply and demand. So given all of that, now, do you still trust them with our beloved city? Another big component of this is that construction costs are also part of the problem, not Measure Y or any kind of zoning. Again, construction of new housing costs $800,000 a unit plus, and it's rising by double digits. The high cost of construction, the labor, the materials, the financing, insurance, make those buildings unaffordable, not Measure Y. The cost of those buildings is the same in cities that don't have anything like Measure Y. And the prices are the same, regardless of whether they have Measure Y. The cost of land is also directly related to its zoning. So if you upzone the land to support more development, you increase the cost of the building. That gets passed on to the future tenants of the building. Also, buildings that exceed 5 to 7 stories have to be constructed differently. They can't make them with just wood. They have to use reinforced concrete or even steel. And they're exponentially or significantly more, an order of magnitude more expensive to construct. You don't have to believe me. San Jose does an annual cost of residential development survey. And pulling directly from that, we can see that the average total development cost per unit in 2023 increased 12 to 13% over the past 18 months and continued to be the most significant barrier to new housing construction. Another paragraph cites construction costs remain the biggest barrier to housing development in the city. Right? In other words, it's not zoning. It's not anything else but those construction costs that are approaching. And in many affordable projects, those costs have actually exceeded $1 million a unit. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative has an affordable housing solutions article where they corroborate this, saying rising construction prices are a significant contributor and that those costs in California, they're particularly bad, and they've increased by 36.5% between 2021 and 2024, and that trend continues. We also need to ask the question of why are we not protecting existing affordable housing? McKinsey and Company put out this article about preserving the largest and most at-risk supply of affordable housing. And they state that in the United States, naturally occurring affordable housing, they call it NOAA, is at risk. And it constitutes the largest supply of affordable units and are predominantly inhabited by low-income people of color. And NOAA assets typically tend to be older and are more likely to be redeveloped when sold, which is increasing the rate at which NOAA units are being lost and further shrinking the supply of affordable housing. In other words, gentrification is a huge problem with regards to solving the affordable and preserving existing affordable housing. And anything that gets built that's new is going to be more expensive. Nothing ever gets replaced with something that's cheaper, right? I mean, that's just kind of common sense. Well, we asked the city of San Mateo, why aren't you focused on preserving existing affordable housing? And their answer was kind of surprising. And they gave us this quote where they basically said that we can't focus on every single area during this cycle. So our housing element's primary focus is around production. Well, the translation there is, we'd rather build, baby, build, 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 build. Measure T makes the quality of life in San Mateo worse, objectively and quantitatively. Again, the Pro-T folks will lean on per capita metrics, of which certain ones may improve, but those actual measures will greatly worsen. And I'll show you data literally from their own general plan. The noise, the air quality, traffic, water supply, etc. And even the numbers that are from their own data that give you these rosy per capita numbers, but show the numbers getting objectively worse, Those are based on highly specious assumptions that everyone's going to get out of their cars and walk, bike, or take our non-existent transit. Also, small businesses and existing affordable housing will be displaced, and those are all ignored by Measure T. So, public safety. Our police department currently has about one sworn officer, a little less, per 1,000 residents. The national average is 1.6 sworn officers per 1,000 residents. That puts San Mateo at a 60% deficit of sworn officers to the national average. And I don't know about you, but we have a lot of organized retail. We have catalytic converter theft, hit and runs, pedestrian collisions, speeding, red light running. Yeah, I could go on and on. Shouldn't this be addressed first? And you have to ask the question, how will an already overstretched department handle the needs of 50,000 more residents? Pivoting over to water, our water demand exceeds supply with the implementation of the 2040 build-out. There it is in black and white, or orange and black in this case. Does 2040 demand exceed supply? This is from their own general plan documents. Yes. Traffic, it gets worse, much worse. Remember the ballot measure says it reduces traffic. It does not. It goes up by 30+%, adding over 1 million miles of vehicle miles traveled. That's the VMT metric they like to use, which has its own problems. It goes from just under 4 million to 5.1 million, right? So it's worse. More people in cars on the same roads. We're not making more roads. So it's objectively worse. The air quality as a result of that and other things is going to get worse. And it's already pretty bad. This is, again, from their own documents, their own maps. You can see, obviously, the red and orange is pretty bad. But even these yellowish green and light green, that's not great air, right? You're the bottom half of air quality. And with more construction, you're going to have more pollution, more people, more cars, more pollution, worse air quality. Worse air quality, well documented the impact that has on not just your quality of life, but your health. There are very serious health implications, everything from asthma to just getting sick more often to things as serious as cancer, right? And again, pulling directly from their data, the major categories of air pollutions from volatile organic compounds to NOx to particulate matter. The 2040 build-out exceeds the Bay Area Air Quality Management District threshold for those first two categories. And it gets measurably worse for the particulate matter category. Noise also gets worse. The map on the left is the existing noise contours. Red is 70 decibels. That's about the level of a vacuum cleaner, or a little louder. And then the yellow is a tick under that at 65. And this is what the 2040 build-out on the right. Now, those might look the same, but if you look carefully, all of those strips and those color contours get a little wider. So they stretch out across more of the city and cover more of the also very populated areas. So when you take it in its totality, this actually makes noise worse across a big swath of the city and impacts a lot of people. So pivoting over to the idea that Measure Y, the Pro-T folks like to say that Measure Y has been around, or some permutation of it's been around for 30 years and it's old, it's outlived its purpose. Well, you could make that argument had nothing else around it changed, if it existed in a vacuum. But this is a California housing legislation highlights. This person, Alfred Twu, you can see the information out of there, the source and whatnot, publishes these on Medium. And I only go back to 2021 on this because all the grayed out ones are legislative, are bills that came out of committee. And then the ones that are highlighted in blue in all of these are bills that got passed. And you can see there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of bills. And I'm going to move over to 2022, and you'll see that font gets smaller. There's more and more. 2023, smaller and smaller, more and more. 2024, this is an older graphic. I should probably update it from May. You see a lot more blue on here. But there is the state legislature is positively overrun with development interests and whatnot, and they have passed so much legislation that extends and overrides and undermines the sanity that Measure Y keeps in place, that there's a lot of development bonuses, a lot of additional development that happens with Y in place. So there's absolutely no reason to overturn Y. And it expires on its own in 2030, which is only 5 years from now. Some interesting facts about San Mateo. I found this to be pretty eye-opening, actually. San Mateo is the second most dense city in San Mateo County. I would have figured it was the most, but it's second only to Daly City, which kind of was eye-opening to me. And it's way up there at 13,195 people. San Mateo's at about 8,300 people per square mile. By comparison, San Francisco is 18,000, a little over 18,000. So San Mateo is a little less than half as dense as San Francisco. It's still pretty darn dense. It's the second. San Francisco is the second densest city in the country, and New York City is the first at 29,000. Just to give you a kind of a rough order of magnitude of those numbers. So think of San Mateo is about a quarter as dense as New York City, which is still a lot more than I would have guessed. And it's twice as dense as Redwood City, which has about the same population. Redwood City is about half of that, 4,164. And really interestingly is in San Mateo are as densely populated as Los Angeles. In other words, the city is very built out and it's very dense. At the same time, our population has declined by about 5% since the last census, sitting right around 100,000. Also importantly, I noted was our average commute time is a mere 25.7 minutes. I don't know about you, but it takes me a half an hour to get anywhere around here, that's pretty good for a commute time. So yeah, you'll have outliers, people that live in far out places, traffic jams and whatnot. It can always be better, but it's not as terrible as some people make it out to be. Our poverty level is also below the average for the metro area and California. So we're doing a pretty good job of helping people out and keeping people out of poverty. We've also achieved a relatively good jobs housing balance. It's an important metric where, again, how many jobs do you have per unit of housing? And it sits around a little less than 1.5, and 1.5 jobs per home. When you talk to experts in that area, they consider that ideal. So in other words, why are we building? So RENA takes this ham-fisted method that does not take into consideration the population density or many other factors that it should. And it just gives the numbers out to everybody and shoves them down your throat. So again, we're not suggesting, nor do most San Mateans say we shouldn't grow at all. But why are we being forced to grow our population by 50% when we already have this level of population density? Our population is actually, dipped a little bit, and we've got this good balance. There's no sprawl here. The city's 7 miles long and less than 2 miles wide. It's bordered by foothills, the ocean, and the bay. So we've done and continue to do our part, and we should not be penalized for that. Couple closing things here. This is an actual rendering of a project that's currently being proposed in Redwood City. And all I have to say is yikes. And this is what happens when you don't have Measure Y. Now, again, the scare tactics with the builder's remedy and whatnot, the Measure T folks will show you these big scary buildings in Menlo Park and Cupertino and other places. And again, those are cities that weren't acting in good faith to meet their RENA numbers and zone for housing per the RENA quotas. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, aren't you? Like you don't, and this is what you get. So Measure Y has served San Mateo well in making things reasonable and smart and controlled, right? And balancing that out. So in summary, the majority of San Mateans have consistently supported the construction of more housing, especially affordable housing. We support continued job growth and economic development, but we don't think it's necessary, and we're not willing to sacrifice our homes, our neighborhoods, our quality of life, or the character of our historic downtown in the process. So T doesn't do what it says it will, and it does a lot of bad things it says it won't. So we urge you to vote no on Measure T for many reasons. Key among those, again, any given council with just 3 votes. That 15% affordable housing becomes 0% or whatever they want. Follow the money. We showed you all the developers and how much they love Measure T and how much they want this to pass so they can build whatever they want. Measure Y and its predecessors have always been about trust, and your voice versus the heights and densities aspect of it. You lose Measure Y, you have to trust developers, you have to trust construction unions and real estate interests, you have to trust the state and your council, and we don't, for good reason, as you can see. And then, as covered, the state laws that grant substantial height and density bonuses on top of Y. There is no need to overturn Y to support growth, especially when Y automatically sunsets in 2030. So we urge you, don't reward bad policy and process with your precious vote, and vote no on Measure T and save Measure Y. Thank you for your time. If you are interested in helping us out, you can visit our website at smartergrowthsm.com, lower left-hand corner, or you can email us at smartergrowthsm@gmail.com with any questions or if you want to get involved. Thanks for listening.